HANNYTIME. A daily look at sports from our resident historian. Your sports break during your lunch break. Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studios. Here's Charles Hannegriff.
Good afternoon. Welcome to HANNYTIME, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Charles Hannegriff, Mario Jerez, and Jacob Beck with you this afternoon. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us today. Have a good weekend. Was there enough to keep you occupied? The baseball, the basketball. You get enough. You enjoy the Pels. Couldn't hold off on that one. A little Pels stuff later on in the show. No, how was it?
It was pretty good, despite the lack of the Pelicans in the playoffs. Had a pretty good weekend, man.
Yeah, everything kind of lined up. Even the weather it really came around the second part of the weekend. So I hope you had a good one. We start with that LSU baseball series against Kentucky. This was overall a very good weekend for LSU. Found out some things that are going to be helpful. Had some people step up, but mostly you just get the series win against what is now the number one RPI team in the country. Before I get into some of the specifics, I'll give you that some of the polls are out today. The Baseball America poll is out. LSU is number one. The D1 baseball poll is out. LSU is number one. The Perfect Game poll is out. LSU is number one. The Collegiate Baseball poll is out. LSU is number one. If there's anything that we need, it's more college baseball polls. Did you know that going into the weekend, there had been 58 polls go out over the course of the season, from the preseason all the way into last weekend, and now we have another 4 today. So let's say 62 polls. In 62 polls, Mario, how many of them has LSU been the number one team in the nation?
Go 60.
All 62.
Wow.
All 62. And when whatever else comes out, the rest of, I think, with the coaches poll and what else is it? The baseball writers. Okay. And if you win a series against the number one RPI team in the country, in Kentucky, which they did, then you stay at number one. Clean sweep. If the SEC tournament started today, LSU would be the 6th seed. Number one in the country, 62 out of 62 polls. I'm not saying that to say that LSU is overrated or underrated or whatever. I'm telling you that that's how good the Southeastern Conference is. That LSU has not lost a series this year. They have a series win against the number one RPI team, the number 5 RPI team, the number 23 and 45 RPI teams, that's Tennessee and Texas A&M, has a split with the number 2 RPI team, and it's April now, so we can talk a little bit about RPIs. Split against the number 2 RPI team in the country in South Carolina on the road, and a win at number 21 Texas. That's good enough to get you the 6th seed in the Southeastern Conference. That's just how good the league is. So I say that to start a little bit of, not a backfire, but just to make you aware. One of your LSU baseball fans today is going to tell you, schedule gets easier in the second half. Okay. The teams in the second half of the schedule as opposed to the first half of the schedule have a worse record. By definition, yes, it is easier, but do not say easy by any stretch of the imagination, because what LSU has got left, LSU, by the way, number 3 in the RPIs, what they have left against an Ole Miss team that has struggled, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Georgia, is all at the bottom of the SEC standings. But when you think about the SEC standings, just remember that the number one team in the country is currently number 6 in the standings when we're doing strength of schedule stuff. So LSU gets an easy win on Thursday night. Paul Skeens going up against Zach Heist was a big mismatch. And, for Kentucky, trying to hold Logan Martin to normal rest on a pitcher that's coming back from an injury. They were going to run him on Friday, so they decided to run Heist out on Thursday, who had only thrown 9 innings all season and was making his first start. So LSU got out in that game 14-1, and it was a very easy win for the Tigers. They ended up with the run rule. They took the ninth off. The big story out of that game was that Gavin Dugas landed on his shoulder in one of the later innings and did not play the rest of the weekend. I would argue right now that outside of Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz, that Gavin Dugas is LSU's most important player. He has been in the leadoff role for most of a good portion of the season. He has hit some very key home runs, had some very key hits, but the grand slam against South Carolina, one of the biggest hits of the season. He's played a good second base, and he's an upperclassman. He's been here for a long time now, and getting him back is very, very important to them. Luckily, the reports were good the rest of the weekend. Jay Johnson is going to meet with the media in the middle of this show, somewhere around 12:30. So if we have any more, but it looks good with what they had seen. Dugas himself said he expects to be back in the lineup next weekend. So that was a good. The loss on Friday, 13-10, was disappointing, mostly because, and you can see this in the games that LSU has lost in the conference this year. Somewhere they've done something to them to hurt themselves, and I thought the toughest inning of the whole weekend was the Kentucky fifth on Friday. This was an inning that they went into with a 6-2 lead. Now LSU, I felt pretty comfortable about where they were. And Ty Floyd, despite giving up a hit and a walk, was in position to get out of the inning, but gave up a hit through the left side, and they had to make the move. I was hoping to get Floyd through the 5 innings. The walks were down a little bit. The strikeouts were also down. But I was hoping to get Ty Floyd a little bit deeper in the game. So he gets 4 2/3, and they got to get him out. And this is where things came unraveled a little bit. Because if you look at Griffin Herring's stat line for the weekend, you're going to say he did not pitch very well. And while it was not a stellar performance, I thought that it was a lot better than what the stat line would have you believe. There were 2 errors in that inning. He's got 2 opportunities now with 2 outs to get out of the inning, and he makes the pitches both times. But neither one of the plays are made. One of them is officially ruled an error. The other one is not ruled an error because the fielder doesn't touch it, but it's certainly an out that should have been made. When you can get the third out and don't, and instead 3 runs scored on a ball hit in the outfield that should have been caught, that weighs on any pitcher, especially a freshman. So I thought Herring battled through it. I thought he gave LSU a chance, but they hit into 4 double plays. And when you do that, you've not only have you left too many people on base, you've squandered too many opportunities. So Kentucky, who ran Logan Martin out there, and he did what he's been doing for the last few weeks, which is just a couple innings. That's all they can get out of him right now. And then they came with Darren Williams behind him. LSU had the opportunities to get back in that ball game, and just never could quite get the big hit. Sometimes that happens. And then Saturday's game, which was the best game of the weekend by far, featured just a lot of twists and turns. First of all, LSU wanted to see what they would get out of Christian Little in the start. His start got axed last week because of the rain. And he, I thought, battled into the 4th inning. He didn't give up a hit. Again, the walks are a problem. They were a problem all weekend throughout the staff. You had 8 in the game on Saturday and 5 in the game on Friday. So that was a problem throughout the weekend. But by far the most encouraging thing that happened was the entrance of Bryce Collins. Now, Collins has been pitching well. If you remember, he came over with Jay Johnson from Arizona last year. Had a nice year last year, but really struggled early this season. Well, it's been over a month since Collins has given up an earned run. Now, a lot of that was in games that honestly had been decided. He was in big wins against Tulane and Nichols. He was in a game against Tennessee where LSU was already down 7 runs when he got in there. A couple other non-conference games where there were big leads for the Tigers. My point is, 5 of the last 6 outings, there have not been pressure situations for Collins. They've been situations where LSU has been way up or they have been weighed down. This was not the case. When he came into the game in the seventh inning, Kentucky was on the verge of taking and extending the lead. And what I liked about Collins is while the walks were a problem for some of the other pitchers this weekend, they were not a problem for him. He came in, he battled, he threw strikes, and LSU made the plays behind him, unlike in the game on Friday where a couple of plays that could have been made. Something else happened. So Bryce Collins, this is by far the best outing of the year for him. You're in a deficit situation. You hold on to where LSU can get themselves back in the ballgame. They get the 3 runs in the 7th and 8th inning, and that's enough. And then you nail it down in the top of the 9th inning. Big ups to Bryce Collins. That was a tremendous performance. The other thing that I thought was significant in this game was how early that Jay Johnson went to Gavin Guidry. Now, they didn't have to use Guidry in either of the first 2 games. It's kind of been kicked around over the last week and a half or so. If LSU's got a 1-run lead going to the last and they've got their choice of pitchers, who would it be? Well, Gavin Guidry was a pretty good guess because he has proven himself in a couple of tight situations where he can come in and close the game. This is Jay Johnson saying, hey, this game is on the line really in the 4th and 5th inning, and we're not going to wait. And a lot of coaches will put themselves behind this particular 8-ball where they will not bring in their best reliever remaining if they're behind, or even if the game is tied sometimes. They brought Guidry in because they needed to stop the bleeding. Now, it wasn't Guidry's best outing. He walked 3, but he managed to get LSU out of the 5th and still have them in a position where they were tied, and then could take the lead in the bottom of the 6th inning. Now, things fell apart in the 7th. Thatcher Hurd is still really struggling. It's a guy they're going to need if they're gonna have the kind of success that they need, but it's still not there for Hurd. Whether it's him still working back from the injury, the rust, confidence problems, take your pick. But at least Guidry gave them a chance, and Riley Cooper gave them a chance to get into the later innings while they were still in striking position to take the lead. And this time they do get the big hits, whereas the big hits had eluded him in the game on Friday. So big ups for, I thought, Bryce Collins. That was good. I didn't hate the start for Christian Little. I'm not wild about the 3 walks, but he didn't give up a hit, something that maybe he can build on. Little's numbers are almost exactly on top of what he did for Vanderbilt a year ago. The ERA numbers, the ratio numbers, are all very, very similar. So Little is giving you what I think was expected of him when he came over. Guidry continues to evolve into his role. Cooper's still a guy that can pitch pretty much every day. Collins makes the big step this weekend. Thatcher Hurd is still a work in progress. Now, this did get a little bit chippy at times, just to bring that up. Jared Jones with a pair of home runs yesterday. Got the average up to 371. He's got double-digit homers now, having a fantastic freshman season. Started woofing a little bit back at the pitchers. Did you see what they were doing? They were quick pitching him. And this is something. This is as old as Doubleday, okay? And with the pitch clock, it's really the first time I've seen it this year where it was this egregious, where they were, everybody's on alert now. Got to be ready to pitch. Got to be ready to hit. Otherwise, the umpires will call it. They're very strict about this stuff. So if you're going to accelerate it even more than that, you're really moving. And Jones kind of took exception to how Kentucky was quick pitching him. So when he hit the ball over the fence, he had a few things. To say. This goes on. This goes on in baseball. This is not. It may have been more demonstrative here. You may have noticed it a little bit more, but it's not like this has never happened on a baseball field. This is just how things. This is how things are played right now. Call it the influence of the World Baseball Classic or whatever, but emotional displays are more commonplace on baseball field than they were even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. This is more of a norm now. For baseball traditionalists, they may not like it, but just trust me when I'm telling you, there's as much talking now as there's ever been, and you might notice it a little bit more. There's a little bit more of the demonstrative celebrations, and it really depends on the umpire as to what how much of it you want to let go on, how much is enough, and how much is too much. At Florida this weekend, there was a player ejected for celebrating, and then later on, when another Gator hit a home run, he this was a wonderful way to make your point that the umpire had overreached his bounds without it's radio, so I'm just going to have to describe it. I can't show it to you, but he hit a grand slam and got to home plate. His teammates are all ready to celebrate with him, and he walks very how would you say it was kind of like a soldier's march back to the dugout. Is that how am I describing it correctly?
Into the Hunt Palmer Show on Monday. Hunt will be back in the host chair. He'll recap LSU baseball, and I'm sure that he'll give us an update and recap on his trip to L.A. It's the Hunt Palmer Show, 1 to 3 weekdays, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is Anytime with Charles Hannegriff on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Latest baseball at the box has been posted, brought to you by Napa Auto Parts. You can get that at 1045ESPN.com. Also, wherever you get your podcast, Dan Canavarian, I reviewing the Kentucky series that is posted right now for a little bit deeper dive into LSU baseball. Friday afternoon, David Griffin met with the media and sought to clarify some of the things that Zion Williamson has said. That's a very nice way to put it. Zion, as you know, earlier in the week last week said that, well, you know what, I feel fine. I can do everything. And then just to prove his point, went out and had that exhibition in the pregame. However, not cleared to play, something that David Griffin wanted to make very clear to the assembled media on Friday.
I think there's been a lot put on him that's not fair. Some of it his own doing. Quite frankly, he came up here the other day and told you all physically I'm fine, and nobody followed up on what that means. Well, physically I'm fine means I'm not currently injured. He wasn't physically cleared to play basketball. He was playing one-on-none. He went up and windmill dunked pregame. Well, that's not the skill set that makes you capable of playing skilled 5-on-5 basketball. He was never cleared to play 5-on-5 basketball. So for people to now say, oh, he chose not to play basketball, that's nonsense. That's not factual. But that's a way more interesting story than the kid wasn't cleared to play basketball. That's the truth.
I agree that that's the truth. It's absolutely the truth. The question is, why wasn't he cleared to play basketball if he feels fine? This is at the whole crux of the matter here. This is 2 years in a row that the kid feels like he can play basketball and the organization doesn't. We did all of this a year ago. The only difference was a year ago, Zion did all of the dunks and all of that stuff and posted it to social media. And this time, for those of you that don't have those social media platforms, he went out and did it in person just to make sure you saw it. He thinks he can play. David Griffin and the organization don't. I'm not saying one's right or the other's right, but they don't agree on when he is ready to play. Is he too heavy? Probably. Is he more injury prone? I don't know how he could get any less injury prone at that weight, but yes. But at some point, are they going? There is going to be there's going to be a conflict in what the player thinks and what the organization thinks, or at least there has been for going on a year. Why isn't there more transparency? Why is there always miscommunication? Griffin talked about that.
I did. I spoke before he did, and I said what was going on and said exactly what was going on. And he makes the one misstatement about physically I'm fine. Well, the reality is, like, what's the thing? So had I been here, I would have clarified it immediately. But what's the thing? So the thing is, when you're going through a rehab process and a player does not report, I'm very comfortable and confident in this movement, you don't go to the next movement. That's not because he's choosing not to play basketball. That's because a rehab protocol requires that a player is comfortable with the movement you're doing. And I understand your question, and like, I'm not saying that you should have possibly known that. You couldn't have possibly known that. So the miscommunication is very largely our fault. But I also think there's a component of this where if we don't, and I'm not saying you specifically do this, but if we don't always look for the most sinister outcome, there's usually not one.
Physically, I'm fine. That's what the player said. Only the player knows for sure how he feels. So when Griffin says, well, I would have clarified that. You would have clarified how he felt? You know better? I got no problem with Griffin coming out and saying, look, he's not cleared. We have these protocols. We have these weight limits. We have these motion limits, and he's got to meet them all before he can play. I got no problem with that. When you lose me a little bit is when you say, well, he said he was fine. I would have clarified that. How? How do you know how he feels better than he feels? Now, there are times where the organization has to save the player from himself. Okay? This happens a lot with concussion protocols. Player says, look, man, I'm fine. They're like, no, you're not fine. And I'm okay with that. But there was one little thing he said in there that caught my attention. If I would have been here, I would have clarified. Where were you? What was more important than this? Seriously. I'm not even trying to be, snarky here. What was more important last week than the general manager and the player, and preferably the coach while we're at it, getting in front and all being on the same page? Why are we having dueling press conferences? What was more important than him being there? I don't know where David Griffin was when Zion talked to the media. I know where he should have been. Also begs the question, was he not there because he didn't know that Zion was speaking right then? Because Zion was supposed to talk in Minnesota last week and didn't. All right, fine. And by the way, the reaction that they're getting from this is not likely to make either one of them talk much more, because they're just getting absolutely barbecued out there, which you can understand. When a player comes out and says, I'm healthy, but I'm just not ready to play, whatever that means, then goes out and does that, that routine. Then the general manager comes out, the team president comes out and says, well, you know what? I would have clarified that. I would have told you how he feels. Oh, Harold, you see what I'm getting at here? It doesn't look like you guys are on the same page. It doesn't look like you guys have the same, you may have the same ending goal, which is to have him back on the floor, but you certainly look like you're in a little bit of conflict about how to get there. Now, whose fault is that? That's what we do. That's the national pastime, right? Transfer all the blame. Okay, so this has got to be somebody's fault. I think it's a little bit everybody. I think that, Williamson could probably be in a little bit better shape than he's in and would have maybe eased this a little bit more. I think the organization could have been a little bit more transparent, would have been a little bit easier. It does get awfully frustrating. But don't act like this just happened this week. This goes back to Zion's rookie year. He went out to Summer League. He played one game. He wasn't in shape. They pulled him out. He missed a lot of time that first year. They brought him back. He's on minutes restriction. Nobody else is. Everybody else comes back from the injury. They go back and play. Not him. He's on minutes restriction. He's frustrated by the minutes restriction. I remember the very first game. He comes out. He hit 6 threes, I think it was.
Spurs.
Against the Spurs, yeah. And then come crunch time for the game, he's got to go to the bench. Because the front office told the coach he's got to go to the bench. Now, everybody else looks like, well, you're trying to win the game. Well, I'm not trying to win the game if it means that he's going to be out for, 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. But I am for trying to win the game. And you're setting these arbitrary minutes restrictions. So that was frustrating. Second year, he pretty much played. Third year, he goes down, or second year, he goes to the bubble. Okay. And then he leaves. I mean, they did the whole bubble format. It was pretty easy to see through. They wanted the Pelicans in the playoffs. They wanted Zion Williamson in the playoffs. And what happened? So they make all of it's this many teams. Well, so they go down to the bubble, and he's there for a very short period of time, and then he leaves with what we find out much later is a hamstring injury, but didn't know that at the time. Not very transparent there. Then last year, go to media days. Yeah, he'll be ready for the start of the season. He didn't play at all. So you understand where the distrust comes from the media and the public, the fans, when you say something about Zion Williamson, especially when Zion Williamson says something that appears to contradict that right before. I feel fine. No, wait. If I was there, I would have told you how he felt. Just break the statement down. Do you realize how foolish that sounds? I see Mario come in here and blow his nose, and I just assume, hey, he's got a cold. He's got the flu. He feels terrible. Mario's like, no, man, I just ate some spicy food at lunch and my nose was running. I'm fine. How do I know how Mario feels? How does Griffin know how Zion feels? Say he doesn't meet the protocols. Fine. I'm okay with that. He also talked about what needs to change so that Zion can be more available.
I wish I could immediately pinpoint the answer. I think a big part of it is on him. I think there's a lot he can do better, and he would, I think, tell you that. He's certainly owned up to that. And I think we need to do a better job of maybe examining the whole situation top to bottom a little bit better. I've heard people say what you're doing is not working. Okay, well, we're aware of that at the time it happens, right? We're not intentionally not doing the right things. So I think finding a way to put him in the best position to succeed is important. And I think his participation in that is a big part of it as well.
That was a very well-worded diplomatic statement, and I think I can cut through the diplomacy there and tell you that what he's saying in a very nice way is I need to get his weight down, and ultimately it's on him. They can provide him with a chef, they can provide him with a trainer, they can provide him with an environment, but ultimately it's up to him to keep his weight down. The more he keeps his weight down, the less likely he is to be injured and the better chance he has to return to the floor. But he doesn't want to come out there and say, hey, guess what? Dude's too heavy. Cleared to play. No. Well enough to play. Well, that's, that remains to be seen. This is going to be a point of contention with the organization and the player until they come to some kind of agreement. And that is not going to happen out in a public forum, nor should it. I know that Zion's camp, be that his family, his agents, whatever, has come under some scrutiny, and maybe that's legit. Maybe they're misadvising him on some facets of his rehab or his return. Certainly the public relations could use a little help. I can speak to that part. But I don't know when the guy's going to get back on the floor. And a lot of times it appears they don't know when he's going to get back on the floor. But I do know that right now the opinions of the player and the management on when he's going to get back on the floor are very much in conflict. Because he feels fine. He's just not cleared to play. Take a break. There's a new highest paid player in the NFL. We'll tell you about Jalen Hurts' contract when we come back. This is HANNYTIME 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is HANNYTIME.
Infinity of Baton Rouge. Right now, ready to buy your vehicle right off of the street. You know, it takes less than 15 minutes for you to get a quote on what your vehicle is worth. At that point, you'll have multiple choices. You can sell it to them outright for cash. You can trade it in on another vehicle, or you can just take the knowledge and, move on. There is no pressure to buy at that point. I highly recommend the Certified Pre-Owned program at Infinity of Baton Rouge. It's worked for us for a number of years. And again, just a couple of months ago, catching a vehicle off of the Certified Pre-Owned lot. It was a large inventory. Each one of these vehicles has been through a long and tough inspection. They're so confident in those inspections to get it back up to code that they'll give you a 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. Your first year of maintenance is prepaid. Courtesy car when you take your vehicle in to be serviced, and roadside assistance is included in the package. They're going to specify to your mileage demands, your age demands, and your price demands. It's going to make for a very easy buying experience at Acura and Infinity of Baton Rouge. So do what we did and head on over to the best, Acura and Infinity of Baton Rouge.
Our listeners fire off their opinions on the jimsfirearms.net hotline at 499-1045. Keep listening for your next chance to shoot us your thoughts with the jimsfirearms.net hotline on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Moscona inviting you to join us for Monday's AFR, presented by Relief Windows. We'll recap the LSU Kentucky baseball series from the box and the football Tigers practice from over the weekend. Join us 3 to 6, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is HANNYTIME with Charles Hannegriff on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Remember, you can always get the show on demand, 104.5 ESPN.com. Jalen Hurts has reached an agreement with the Philadelphia Eagles. 5 years, $255 million, $179 million of it guaranteed. Jalen Hurts is what general managers, when they dream about a situation and a player like Jalen Hurts, okay? Not that he's been the best quarterback in football for the last 3 years. What I mean is the whole situation with Jalen Hurts. Look, obviously you'd like to have, Patrick Mahomes, okay? Mahomes is really good. But in Jalen Hurts, you have the dream scenario, what every general manager wants. If you're a general manager and, they wander upon the lamp and the genie comes out and says, "What do you want?" And he says, "Okay, here's what I want. I want to go draft a quarterback in the second round. Not in the first round where the entire weight of the world is, looking over our shoulder. I want to go draft a quarterback in the second round. I want him to become the starter as a rookie. I want him to outperform his rookie deal in his second year. In his third year, I want him to really come into his own and be an MVP candidate, and I want to go to the Super Bowl. Then I want to sign him to a long-term deal. While I'm doing all of this, I want a player who is incredibly durable, plays all the games, is incredibly hardworking, does not have any off-the-field drama, signs a contract extension, we give him the big money, and then all of his numbers are still going up because before we kick the football again, he's only going to turn 25. The genie usually looks at the general manager and says, "Anything else? That's kind of a lot." Because usually you don't get this in a second-round pick. Think about what the Eagles have gotten out of Jalen Hurts. They get a guy who goes in to the lineup for Carson Wentz, who was supposed to be. That was the guy that they traded up for. That was the guy that they were put big money into before the injury completely derailed his career. So they say, you know what, we're drafting you as a backup quarterback, maybe as a Swiss Army knife kind of player where we can do some different things with you. We're not really sure you're ever going to be the starting quarterback. So when he goes in there, they can't get him out. And then the next year they say, well, we need you to prove it. So he goes out and he proves it. And then the third year, you're like, okay, we see it once again. We're ready to commit long term. And the yards per attempt go up significantly. The touchdowns go up significantly. The interceptions go down significantly. And he plays every game. That's becoming a bigger and bigger thing to me these days. Football, baseball, basketball, the guys that show up and play every day, they get a lot more credit in my book. So he shows up and hardly ever gets hurt. The guy's played all the games the last 3 years that he's been asked to play in. Doesn't disappear in the offseason. So where, hey, where'd Jalen go? Oh, I don't know. He's on retreat. Well, he's not in some dark room somewhere. He's here. He's communicating with the team. He's, very well liked, doing all of the things that he needs to do. But, we do have to talk about the drama with Jalen Hurts, though. There's no drama with Jalen Hurts, okay? There's no prolonged contract holdout. There's no retreat into the darkness. There's no massage therapist with a story about how he acted inappropriately. All you've heard is that Jalen Hurts has done everything the way you're supposed to do it, has gotten better every year, had his team very close to a world championship last year, and now he's being rewarded. This is the way it's supposed to go. This is the general manager's dream. This is everything you could ever want out of a player in a situation. You got it all. Hurts asked for one thing that had never been done before in Eagles history, which I thought was very reasonable. He asked for a no trade. You asking me to commit to you. I'm asking you to commit to me. I would prefer not to be traded. Not that Jalen Hurts is in any danger of being traded, but that's pretty much the only thing that was out of the ordinary here. Been an interesting ride for Jalen Hurts. There were, if ever there was a quarterback that was in position to complain a little bit, it probably would have been him. 2016, he shows up at Alabama. He wins the job as a freshman. First quarterback to start at Alabama as a freshman since the early 80s, since right after Bryant passed away. And the first SEC Player of the Year. I remember Lane Kiffin, putting that offense in that really suited what he did. It was more of a horizontal offense, and he really got it going. They were terrific. The game here, where basically 10-0, one play made, and he makes it. But then here comes Tua, and Tua is more highly rated than Hurts was. And at the national championship game, they put this guy on the bench. Now, they had a transfer portal. Most quarterbacks would have transferred before the start of the fourth quarter. You benching me? SEC Player of the Year last year, man. We're in the national championship game because you putting me on the bench? We know what happened. Tua made the pass, they won. The next year, he comes back. He came back the next year. And you know what? They needed him because then he had to come in to replace Tua in the SEC championship game to get him into the college football playoff, and he did that. Then he finally did transfer to players last year. I don't blame him. Went to Oklahoma, had a big year. They lost to LSU, but Hurts had a really big year. And then they take him in the second round of the draft, and they say, let's see how things go. And he replaces Wentz, whose career was on the right path. Had a lot of similarities to Hurts. Had come up, and it wasn't a second round pick, but was ascending to the point in his career early where he looked like he was going to be the MVP the year he got hurt. But then his whole career unraveled. Then Philadelphia went in the last year. They go into the playoffs, and they say, you know what, next year, if you prove it, we'll give you a contract. And they went 14-1 when he was the starting quarterback. And they got in to the Super Bowl. And they almost won the Super Bowl. I'll be honest, I like Jalen Hurts an awful lot as a college quarterback. If you'd have told me he's going to be one day the highest paid player in the NFL, I would have said no. That's not going to happen. I thought that he had a chance to be a good NFL player for a while. I actually thought he would be more in the Taysom Hill type of role than he would be in this role as a potential MVP quarterback. Why? Because he does a lot of different things well. His involvement in the running game with Philadelphia has surprisingly not come at the expense of developing him as a passer. And if you think that's easy to pull off, just look at any quarterback that came into the league with maybe some questions about their accuracy or questions about their ability to put the ball into tight windows with the type of velocity that you need because they were just really good athletes in college. And then you look at what the development of Hurts has been, and you're like, wow, that's exactly the way you would want to do it. That's the general manager's dream. So good for him. He's going to be a force in the NFC for a long time. The one thing the Eagles are going to have to decide, though, is in addition to all those other numbers going up, the passing numbers, the yards per attempt, all of those things, the completion percentage, all those numbers are going up. His rushing attempts have also gone up every year. And even when you take the 25 or so carries that are all in these quarterback sneaks, which they're going to let the scrum stay in the NFL, much to my disappointment, but that play is going to stay in. They're going to have to decide how much they're willing to risk on making Hurts vulnerable to some of these hits. But I'll tell you, his durability has been extremely strong his entire time, either at Alabama, Oklahoma, or with the Eagles. This guy answers the bell every time. He's a very physical player, but he's also a very durable player so far. Now look, nothing lasts forever, so you do want to protect your quarterback. You'd rather him not at some course in his late 20s, early 30s, end up like Cam Newton, which is, man, you just expose this guy to too many hits. His career is going to end soon. So far with Jalen Hurts, they've done a good job at keeping him healthy. He's done a good job of keeping himself aligned into the game to do that, because he's very good at not taking these big hits. He gets down when he needs to get down. He needs to get out of bounds when he gets out of bounds. The only thing that bothers me is the scrum, is that somebody's going to take his knee and twist it backwards. But they'll have to. You weigh the risk rewards. $255 million. Jalen Hurts got paid today. We'll take a break, come back and take some of your questions. This is Hanny Time, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is Hanny Time.
It's Monday at Big Mike's. That means all-you-can-eat boiled shrimp. Every Monday night starting at 5 o'clock all the way until close, it's all-you-can-eat boiled shrimp. And if hot boiled crawfish are on your mind, every day starting at 11 o'clock, 7 days a week, those crawfish come out at Big Mike's. Live music every weekend, and happy hour drink prices from 3 to 7 Monday through Friday, and all day on Sunday. Off-site catering available from Big Mike's, and also if you want to rent out the multiple party rooms, multiple sizes for your private get-togethers, Big Mike's can take care of that for you. Part of the Denham Springs tradition, the Denham Springs Hall of Fame up at the front of the restaurant on Aspen Boulevard in Denham Springs. Big Mike's, we're kind of a big deal.
In times of need, get a full list of phone numbers, websites, and other important emergency information on the Demco Stormwatch page at 1045ESPN.com.
Join me, Jimmy Ott, and Charles Hannegriff. We're on campus at the Cook Hotel and Conference Center at LSU for the Monday evening edition of Game Time. It's Game Time, 6 to 8 p.m. Monday, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
1045 ESPN Baton Rouge and the Baton Rouge Clinic bring you the Dreams Come True Radiothon. Dreams Come True is an organization designed to help grant dreams for children with life-threatening illnesses and their families. The Dreams Come True Radiothon is presented today by the Baton Rouge Men's Clinic, Patient Plus, and Louisiana Federal Land Bank. Donate today at 1045ESPN.com.
This is HANNYTIME with Charles Hannegriff on 1045 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Bayou Ford chat, some questions. Ask Kenny, were you impressed with how competitive Kentucky was playing their brand of baseball while being way overmatched talent-wise? I don't know, 1 to 35, how overmatched they were. I'll tell you this. It's a really good club. They do a lot of things well. If I were a Kentucky fan, my biggest concern would be frontline starting pitching. The first 2 starters don't get out of the second, and the third starter doesn't get out of the fourth. I have similar concerns about LSU's starting pitching after you get past Skeens, but if I were no, they're a good club. That's the number 1 RPI club in the country still, but that would be my biggest concern if I were them. Ask Hanny, do you think the seat is hot for LSU softball? I don't know that her seat is hot. I don't think that she is in danger of losing her job. I do think that the program has plateaued a little bit, and they need to figure out why. For instance, last week they played a non-conference game with Oklahoma. Oklahoma's the gold standard in the country, and they lost the game 2-0. I think they gave up 2 hits, and Beth Torina said after the game, hey, listen, we can play with anybody. And I think she's probably right, except that their record has hovered in the conference, right around the middle for a while now. And, they lost a series at Auburn this weekend. So I would be waiting on the breakthrough, I guess is what I would say. And I would want to know what they need to do to break through. Speaking of Oklahoma, they win the gymnastics national championship again. That's 5 out of 6. You want to know the programs that are going to affect the SEC the most when Oklahoma and Texas come into the league? It ain't football. It ain't men's basketball. It ain't baseball. They automatically come in with the best softball and best gymnastics teams in the league by a lot. Those will be the 2 sports that are going to change probably the dynamic of the competition the most. Thanks to everybody for participating. For Mario and Jacob, I'm Charles Hannegriff saying thank you and good afternoon. Stay tuned for Hunt Palmer on 104.5 ESPN Baton.